But I can make no sense of this presentiment, and that I understand is very often the case with the best presentiments, that you can make no sense of them, so perhaps it is a true presentiment apt to be borne out. But can any more sense be made of false presentiments? I think so, yes. I think that all that is false may more readily be reduced to notions clear and distinct from all other notions, but I may be wrong. But I was not given to presentiments, but to sentiments sweet and simple, to episentiments rather, if I may venture to say so, for I knew in advance, which made all presentiments superfluous. I will even go further. What can I lose? I knew only in advance, for when the time came I knew no longer, you may have noticed it, or only when I made a superhuman effort. And when the time was past, I no longer knew either. I regained my ignorance, and all that taken together, if that is possible, should serve to explain many things, and notably my astonishing old age. Still green in places, assuming the state of my health, in spite of all I have said about it, is insufficient to account for it. Simple supposition committing me to nothing, but I was saying that if my progress at this stage was becoming more and more slow and painful, this was not due solely to my legs, but also to innumerable so-called weak points, having nothing to do with my legs. Unless one is to suppose gratuitously that they and my legs were part of the same syndrome, which in that case would have been of a diabolical complexity. The fact is, and I deplore it, but it is too late now to do anything about it, that I have laid too much stress on my legs throughout these wanderings, to the detriment of the rest. For I was no ordinary cripple, far from it, and there were days when my legs were the best part of me, with the exception of the brain capable of forming such a judgment. I was therefore obliged to stop more and more often. I shall never weary of repeating it, and to lie down in defiance of the rules, now prone, now supine, now on one side, now on the other, and as much as possible with the feet higher than the head, to dislodge the clots. And to lie with the feet higher than the head when your legs are stiff is no easy matter, but don't worry, I did it. When my comfort was at stake, there was no trouble I would not go to. The forest was all about me, and the boughs, twining together at a prodigious height compared to mine, sheltered me from the light and the elements. Some days I advanced no more than 30 or 40 paces, I give you my oath. To say I stumbled in impenetrable darkness, no, I cannot. I stumbled, but the darkness was not impenetrable, for there reigned a kind of blue gloom more than sufficient for my visual needs. I was astonished this gloom was not green rather than blue, but I saw it blue, and perhaps it was. The red of the sun mingling with the green of the leaves gave a blue result. That is how I reasoned. But from time to time, what tenderness in these little words, what savagery. But from time to time I came on a kind of crossroads. You know, a star or circus of the kind to be found in even the most unexplored of forests. And turning then methodically to face the radiating paths in turn, hoping for I know not what, I described a complete circle, or less than a circle, or more than a circle, so great was the resemblance between them. Here the gloom was not so thick, and I made haste to leave it. I don't like gloom to lighten, there's something shady about it. I had a certain number of encounters in this forest, naturally, where does one not? But nothing to signify. I notably encountered a charcoal burner. I might have loved him, I think, if I had been 70 years younger, but it's not certain. For then he too would have been younger by as much. Oh, not quite as much, but much younger. I never really had much love to spare, but all the same I had my little quota when I was small, and it went to the old men when it could. And I even think I had time to love one or two, or not with true love. No, nothing like the old woman. I've lost her name again. Rose. No. Anyway, you see who I mean. But all the same, how shall I say, tenderly as those on the brink of a better earth. I was a precocious child, and then I was a precocious man. Now they all give me the shits, the ripe, the unripe, and the rotting from the bough. He was all over me, begging me to share his hut, believe it or not. A total stranger. Sick with solitude, probably. I say charcoal burner, but I really don't know. I see smoke somewhere. That's something that never escapes me, smoke. A long dialogue ensued, interspersed with groans. I could not ask him the way to my town, the name of which escaped me still. I asked him the way to the nearest town. I found the necessary words and accents. He did not know. He was born in the forest, probably, and had spent his whole life there. I asked him to show me the nearest way out of the forest. I grew eloquent. His reply was exceedingly confused. Either I didn't understand a word he said, or he didn't understand a word I said, or he knew nothing, or he wanted to keep me nearer. It was towards this fourth hypothesis that in all modesty I leaned, for when I made to go, he held me back by the sleeve. So I smartly freed a crutch and dealt him a good dent on the skull. That calmed him. The dirty old brute. I got up and went on. But I hadn't gone more than a few paces, and for me at this time a few paces meant something when I turned and went back to where he lay, to examine him. Seeing he had not ceased to breathe, I contented myself with giving him a few warm kicks in the ribs with my heels. This is how I went about it. I carefully chose the most favorable position a few paces from the body, with my back, of course, turned to it. Then, nicely balanced on my crutches, I began to swing backwards, forwards, feet pressed together, or rather legs pressed together, for how could I press my feet together with my legs in the state they were? But how could I press my legs together in the state they were? I pressed them together, that's all I can tell you, take it or leave it, or I didn't press them together. What can that possibly matter? I swung, that's all that matters, in an ever-widening arc, until I decided the moment had come and launched myself forward with all my strength, and consequently a moment later backward, which gave the desired result. Where did I get this access of vigor? From my weakness, perhaps. The shock knocked me down. Naturally, I came to a cropper. You can't have everything. I've often noticed it. I rested a moment, then got up, picked up my crutches, took up my position on the other side of the body, and applied myself with method to the same exercise. I always had a mania for symmetry, but I must have aimed a little low, and one of my heels sank in something soft. However, if I had missed the ribs with that heel, I had no doubt landed in the kidney. Oh, not hard enough to burst it. No, I fancy not. People imagine because you're old, poor, crippled, terrified that you can't stand up for yourself. And generally speaking, that is so. But given favorable conditions, a feeble and awkward assailant in your own class, in a lonely place, and you have a good chance of showing what stuff you are made of. And it is doubtless in order to revive interest in this possibility, too often forgotten, that I have delayed over an incident of no interest in itself, like all that has a moral. But did I at least eat from time to time? Perforce, roots, berries, sometimes a little mulberry, a mushroom from time to time, trembling, knowing nothing about mushrooms. What else? Ah, yes, carobs, so dear to goats. In a word, whatever I could find. Forests abound in good things, and having heard, or more probably read somewhere in the days when I thought I would be well advised to educate myself, or amuse myself, or stupefy myself, or kill time, that when a man in a forest thinks he is going forward in a straight line, in reality he is going in a circle. I did my best to go in a circle, hoping in this way to go in a straight line, for I stopped being half-witted and became sly whenever I took the trouble. In my head was a storehouse of useful knowledge. In my head was a storehouse of useful knowledge, and if I did not go in a rigorously straight line with my system of going in a circle, at least I did not go in a circle, and that was something. And by going on doing this day after day and night after night, I looked forward to getting out of the forest someday, for my region was not all forest, far from it. But there were plains too, mountains and sea, and some towns and villages connected by highways and byways. And I was all the more convinced that I would get out of the forest someday, as I had already got out of it more than once, and I knew how difficult it was not to do again what you have done before, but things had been rather different then, and yet I did not despair of seeing the light tremble someday through the still boughs, the strange light of the plain, its pale wild eddies through the bronze still boughs, which no breath ever stirred. But it was a day I dreaded too, so that I was sure it would come sooner or later, for it was not so bad being in the forest. I could imagine worse, and I could have stayed there till I died, unrepining. Yes, without pining for the light and the plain and the other amenities of my region. For I knew them well, the amenities of my region, and I considered that the forest was no worse, and it was not only no worse to my mind, but it was better in this sense that I was there. That is a strange way, is it not, of looking at things? Perhaps less strange than it seems, for being in the forest, a place neither worse nor better than the others, and being free to stay there, was it not natural I should think highly of it, not because of what it was, but because I was there. For I was there. And being there, I did not have to go there. And that was not to be despised, seeing the state of my legs and my body in general. That is all I wish to say, and if I did not say it at the outset, it is simply that something was against it. But I could not stay in the forest. I mean, I was not free to. That is to say, I could have. Physically, nothing could have been easier, but I was not purely physical. I lacked something, and I would have had the feeling, if I had stayed in the forest, of going against an imperative. At least, I had that impression. But perhaps I was mistaken. Perhaps I would have been better advised to stay in the forest. Perhaps I could have stayed there without remorse, without the painful impression of committing a fault, almost a sin. For I have greatly sinned at all times, greatly sinned against my prompters, and if I cannot decently be proud of this, I see no reason either to be sorry, but imperatives are a little different, and I have always been inclined to submit to them. I don't know why, for they never lead me anywhere, but tore me from places where, if all was not well, all was no worse than anywhere else, and then when silent, leaving me stranded. So I knew my imperatives well, and yet I submitted to them. It had become a habit. It is true, they nearly all bore on the same question, that of my relations with my mother, and on the importance of bringing as soon as possible some light to bear on these, and even on the kind of light that should be brought to bear and the most effective means of doing so. Yes, these imperatives were quite explicit and even detailed until, having set me in motion at last, they began to falter, then went silent, leaving me there like a fool who neither knows where he is going nor why he is going there. And they nearly all bore, as I may have already said, on the same painful and thorny question, and I do not think I could mention even one having a different purport. And the one enjoining me then to leave the forest without delay was in no way different from those I was used to as to its meaning. For in its framing I thought I noticed something new. For after the usual blarney, there followed this solemn warning. Perhaps it is already too late. It was in Latin, Nemus Ciro, I think that's Latin. Charming things, hypothetical imperatives. But if I had never succeeded in liquidating this matter of my mother, the fault must not be imputed solely to that voice which deserted me prematurely. It was partly to blame. That's all it can be reproached with. For the outer world opposed my succeeding too with its wiles. I have given some examples. And even if the voice could have harried me to the very scene of action, even then I might well have succeeded no better because of the other obstacles barring my way. And in this command, which faltered, then died, it was hard not to hear the unspoken entreaty, "Don't do it, Molloy." And forever reminding me thus of my duty was its purpose to show me the folly of it? Perhaps, fortunately, it did no more than stress, the better to mock if you like, an innate velleity. And of myself, all my life, I think I'd been going to my mother with the purpose of establishing our relations on a less precarious footing. And when I was with her, and I often succeeded, I left her without having done anything. And when I was no longer with her, I was again on my way to her, hoping to do better the next time. And when I appeared to give up and to busy myself with something else or with nothing at all anymore, in reality I was hatching my plans and seeking the way to her house. This is taking a queer turn. So even without this so-called imperative I impugn, it would have been difficult for me to stay in the forest since I was forced to assume my mother was not there.